So, a section on blood vessels and blood, really this is assumed knowledge, stuff that you should have a reasonable idea about coming into an A-level course, perhaps done at GCSE or in biology. You can see that there are five key blood vessels that we need to look at: veins, venules, capillaries, arterioles and arteries, and we look at them in terms of particularly their structure and their function. So very much structure links to function. Things are built, vessels are built to do a particular job. So we'll look at how they're built and we'll look at the function, the job that they have to do. So you can see here we've got some factors: diameter, wall thickness, the components of the walls, and there's a bit of a visual for you for each of the five vessels. And you can see here clearly that the two larger diameter vessels are arteries and veins. And you can also see that these vessels have the thicker walls. And if we look at the constituents of the walls, you can see that the veins and also the arteries here have smooth muscle, so that's muscle, and elastic tissue. And veins also have some smooth muscle and some elastic tissue, though less. So arteries clearly have a thicker muscular wall, but veins do have a degree of muscular wall. Notably, as do arterioles, and we'll talk in a different video about the role that arterioles have and why they need a muscular wall. The tiniest diameter blood vessels, these micrometer values here, so only 8 micrometers. A micrometer is a thousandth of a millimeter, so it's tiny, are capillaries, and they have nothing else but basically one cell wall thick. So that's an overview really of the diameter and wall thickness of those five vessels. You can see here a different perspective, cross-sectional perspective, and this clearly shows you that an artery has a decent sized lumen. The lumen's the gap in the middle, and distinctly has the thickest muscular wall. So this is smooth muscle tissue. Veins do have smooth muscle tissue, this grey area here, but much less, but have a significantly larger lumen. And capillaries are tiny lumen with one cell thick wall. Just briefly, obviously each of the arteries and the veins have 3 layers: an outer, a middle and an inner layer. And again, this really just shows you, this diagram shows you the reddy colour layer here is the tunica media, the middle layer, the muscular layer. And here this artery has a much thicker tunica media than this vein does. And this gives it a good ability to change its diameter. So let's look specifically at arteries then, looking at structure and function. You'll also have to know a little bit about artery and some of the issues that come with arteries for another section of this cardiovascular system when we look at the diseases that we associate with the cardiovascular system. So ideally we have a healthy artery looking like this, a decent sized lumen and a thick muscular wall. So arteries are built with a thick muscular elastic layer so that as the blood surges through them, because they cope with blood under very high pressure and high velocity that's just been injected from the heart. So structurally these arteries need to be able to expand and recoil every time the heart beats. This blood surges through these vessels. So it's structured in that way to cope with that high pressure and high velocity. They're controlled by the sympathetic nervous system and generally take blood away from the heart. A silly little way of maybe remembering is arteries away, veins take blood towards the heart. Might help you remember which is which. Arterioles, however, are kind of different vessels totally. So we've got the one big artery, the aorta, we've got smaller arteries sending blood over to different areas of the body, and then we've got arterioles which have a different job. And you can see an arteriole here with smooth muscle wrapped around it and a capillary bed, and those really are quite important. So arterioles are smaller branches of arteries that lead into capillaries. They're controlled again by the sympathetic nervous system, and the fact that they have this smooth muscle tissue around them means that they're able to vasoconstrict, which means get narrower and minimize flow through them, or they can vasodilate and widen and relax, and that allows more blood to flow through them more easily. The reason they have this structure and this ability to vasoconstrict and vasodilate is they're really important for distributing blood. So if an arteriole vasoconstricts, it will narrow and it will reduce blood flow going to a certain area, to a certain capillary bed, or if it vasodilates, it will allow blood to be distributed into that capillary bed in that area. So these are very significant in distributing blood and where the blood goes or doesn't go. Just pause the video, have a closer look at this diagram. Again, it's just a little bit more information about what we would call vasomotor control. So this is referring purely to the arterioles being able to vasoconstrict or vasodilate. They are stimulated to vasoconstrict or vasodilate by the sympathetic nerves. And again, I mentioned precapillary sphincters because not only do arterioles control blood flow and where the blood goes, but these precapillary sphincters, you can see them here, will restrict blood, in this case, going to this capillary network, or in this example here, where the precapillary sphincter is relaxed, will allow blood to go into that network. So this is a second factor. Just before capillary beds, we have a precapillary sphincter. Closed, it will stop flow. Open and relaxed, it will allow flow. Again, controlled by sympathetic nervous stimulation. So capillaries then, if blood is flowing through capillaries, it's flowing at a very slow, oozy rate because these vessels are very, very, very narrow and they are literally one cell thick. So we describe capillaries as capillary beds, and they tend to surround important organs like our muscles or our lungs and our alveoli. The reason they're in those important areas is because this is where gas exchange will happen. Oxygen or carbon dioxide will diffuse from one place to the other and supply us with the gases or remove the waste products that we need to get rid of. So capillaries are essential for gas exchange, and for that reason they are built very narrow and very thin-walled. Venules basically take blood away from a capillary network and feed into bigger veins. So they're actually just kind of linking vessels. There's not a great deal to say about venules. They're larger than capillaries, they're smaller than veins, and they transport blood from capillary networks into the bigger veins. So you can see here's our capillary network, here's a venule leading into a vein. Finally then, veins. So this image shows how you can see clearly actually the lumen of the vein is much larger, and inside you can see a valve. So the big veins that we have in our body also have valves, because the job of the veins is essentially to return blood to the heart. So we want to make it as easy as possible for these vessels to return blood, often against gravity, back up to the heart, and that's why the lumen is large, because it allows blood to flow easily, and the valves are there also to stop backflow. So veins return blood to the heart, and this is called venous return, and it's very important that the muscle pump, skeletal muscle pump mechanism is working to help the veins do their job, because this massaging action of our skeletal muscles helps squeeze the blood back up in the veins against gravity to get it back to the heart. There is an element of venomotor control as well, venomotor tone. You should remember that there is also a muscular wall, so this is smooth muscle in the walls of veins, and that can constrict a little bit to again help blood flow through the veins. So there are key that was just an image of the muscle pump there. So there are key blood vessels: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules and veins, and you need to appreciate the structure and the function of those different vessels. So lastly, just to very, very quickly have a look at blood. Again, this is assumed knowledge, prior knowledge. You should know that the majority of blood is made up of plasma, a watery fluid, which basically acts as our transport mechanism, and it carries around the solid bits of constituents of our blood, so our white blood cells, our platelets, and importantly our red blood cells. Here's just a different perspective to show you the sort of size. So if this was an artery, red blood cells are really quite tiny in the artery, white blood cells are bigger, and then these little blobs here are the platelets. So what do they do? Plasma is our, as I said, our transport mechanism, our fluid to carry the bits around. Red blood cells are associated with oxygen transport. So red blood cells produced in our bone marrow contain hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is the oxygen carrier of the blood. So oxygen attaches to the iron element of hemoglobin and carries it around, and this makes it red in colour. So arterial blood, which has got a lot of oxygen, is typically bright red. White blood cells made in yellow bone marrow are more or less our protection system, so they fight disease or any infection that we might have. Platelets are important for us, and this is our clotting agent. So if you cut yourself, platelets will go to work and will basically try to gel and reduce blood loss.